Our next speaker has been doing just that for decades. Jim Riddle, who runs Blue, want to get this right, Blue Fruit Farm in Winona. Many of you know Jim. Actually helped start the Organic Inspectors Association 20 years ago, and has been intimately involved in the organic farm movement. He served on the National Organic Standards Board as its chair, which is a tremendous public service to all of us in trying to ensure that the standards that govern that green label that says USDA organic is in fact compliant with the underlying principles and values that are embedded in the Organic Foods Production Act. Jim will talk about that, I'm sure, but his history suggests to us that we do need that standard. That standard is unique in the marketplace. It has meaning, whereas the natural label has no meaning. And as a result, I think Jim is the perfect person to help frame this conference on the point of the solution. So I want to welcome Jim Riddle to the stage, and thank you, Jim, for being here and for all that you do.
Thank you, Jay, and thanks for inviting me here. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to spring in Minnesota, if you aren't a local, which is a bit scary because I do raise fruit, and they thought it was spring about a month ago. And so I've got things blooming, and this morning it was 30 degrees. Some of the things can take it, but other things we'll just have to wait and see. But anyway, yeah, I live Winona, which is about 2.5 hours downriver in southeast Minnesota, driftless region, just beautiful part of the country, part of the state, a lovely place to live. And Jay neglected to mention, I did serve on the Beyond Pesticides Board, so it's great to see some of you people that I served and got to know during that time as well. Now, it says in the program that the title of my talk is Charting an Organic Future, the Challenges and Successes, Past and Future. Well, I guess that seemed a little redundant, but I changed it. And so my title is Make America Organic Again. All right, I'm glad I did that. I'm done. But I chose this for 3 reasons, really. I mean, one, it's a time to be bold. And yeah, nobody can be more bold than Ronnie. It's always hard to live up to. But yeah, I love Ronnie because Ronnie makes me look reasonable. He gives me space to operate. But also, yeah, it does seem that audacity is being rewarded in today's society, so it is a time to be bold. But also, I'm going to spend part of my talk speaking conservative to you, so it fits that theme. But as a reminder that this land, North America, has been organic a whole lot longer than it's been chemical. You know, the whole industrial chemical experiment is quite recent, like 70 years. Put that in perspective. The biotech experiment is only 20 years. This is nothing in time. And just like to focus, let's get this to move. Don't tell me it went to sleep. Well, try this arrow. Well, we're going to stay organic again. I guess I need a little help. Right?
There we go.
There, we're working. Okay. Try to go back. Oh, it gets bigger. It was supposed to do that on cue. Sorry. Anyway, it's really been a short period of time, and what have we learned? Well, what do we see? Depleted soils. I mean, that is so clear. I just spoke at Iowa State down in Ames A couple weeks ago, drove down from Winona across I-90 and down 35. Just black soil everywhere. It is rare to even see corn stalks or stubble, let alone living, green, growing things that are actually capturing carbon and building soil health. That's just not the reality that we're living in. So depleted soils, dead zones at the mouth of every river. It's not just the Gulf of Mexico or Chesapeake Bay. Anywhere that water is draining agricultural land, it's killing the life in the lakes, the bays, the estuaries. A total loss of biodiversity. So many species have gone extinct or are threatened at this time because of the agricultural practices. But also contaminated ground and surface water. And it's nitrates, it's pesticides that are in the rivers, the lakes, the streams, but also in the groundwater. That's one of the results of this chemical experiment. And it just keeps increasing. One of the promises of biotech, it would lead to a decrease in pesticide use. Well, USDA's own data shows that's not true. There's been a massive increase in herbicide use, and the one thing that's never factored into these calculations is the fact that the BT corn, the seed itself, is a registered insecticide. There's many more pounds of insecticides being used when you add in the fact that the BT is a registered pesticide and it remains biologically active in the ecosystem after the corn is harvested. It continues to kill. So there's massive increase in pesticides. Along with that, the explosion of pesticide-resistant weeds, over 20 species now, can't be killed with the herbicides, and then the insects developing resistance. And one of the BT traits is to kill the corn rootworm. Within 5 years, 2 rootworms had natural resistance, found each other. Now we have populations of resistant corn rootworms all throughout the Corn Belt. But also antibiotic resistance among pathogens because of the widespread use in the CAFOs to keep the animals alive and as growth promoters of antibiotics. Of course, then the pathogens develop antibiotic resistance. And then these massive epidemics, like last year, the highly pathogenic avian influenza in the Midwest, but also pork, mad cow disease, one thing after another related to this industrial system. And then the consolidation. I'm not going to go into that, but it just keeps getting more monopolies amongst the oligarchy controlling this. And the patenting of life, which I mean, that has empowered the control to be locked in. It used to be farmers bought seed. It was their seed once they bought it. Now you don't even buy seed. You sign a licensing agreement to basically rent that technology. The DNA is still the property of the biotech company because they patented it. You can't reproduce it. It's not your property. Has this made life in rural America better? No. I mean, you talk about food deserts. You get out in rural Minnesota, it's really hard to find good food. But closed schools, churches, businesses, and the farms consolidating as well, loss of the population. And it hasn't been cheap. As taxpayers, we are funding this at massive government subsidies to keep this system afloat. So it's not like it pencils out without this support. And in the meantime, the food itself just keeps getting less nutritious. When you're just applying a simple NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, fertilizer regime, you get what looks like food, but crops need a lot more than that to produce healthy nutrition. So you get empty nutrition even before it gets processed. And then a significant increase in food allergies. The Center for Disease Control did a study released, I think it was just last year. In the 10 years they were looking at, childhood food allergies increased by 50%. in the time that the biotech crops have become part of the normal diet of the food system. There was no corresponding increase in other types of allergies, but a huge increase in food allergies for children. And all sorts of food and exposure-related diseases, diabetes, cancer, autism, one thing after another. So this is what we're getting. But also the farm families and the farm workers are on the front lines. So extremely high rates of cancer, depression, suicide, especially amongst pesticide applicators. A huge study done by University of North Carolina and University of Iowa, 89,000 pesticide applicators that were tracked and finding shockingly high rates of depression and suicide. That it doesn't just affect the physical health, but also the mental health. And then this whole thing of compromised science, we've seen that recently with the EPA, just suppressing scientific truth about some of these impacts because of the power and the political collusion. It used to be a revolving door. Now it's just an open door. It's just one way in. You have the CEO of Dow there at the table when Trump is signing executive order undermining regulations, hands him the pen. I mean, that is no revolving door. That's, you're my buddy, you're here anytime you want. Well, I could go on, but I'm not. But these are some of the impacts of this chemical agriculture experiment. Well, what do we know on the flip side about organic systems? Well, we know that they build soil health. And this isn't an accident. This is written right into the law. It's in the regulation. It's inspected. It's certified. People have to actually track how they're maintaining or improving the health of the soil. And it really works. So you're building soil organic matter, building the ecology of the soil, and sequestering carbon at much higher rates even than chemical no-till, where you've got the land dead for at least 8 months of the year, because there aren't cover crops and soil-building crop rotations used typically in conventional systems. But organic is also enhancing both the biological diversity as well as the genetic diversity. And there's numerous studies, and I don't have citations in this particular show, but I've got them if you want to find out more. But looking at organic and conventional farms, every level, every tropic level, from the soil ecosystem to the avian populations, that organic supports and builds that biodiversity at every level, much better than a conventional system. But protecting water quality and quantity, and that's something else we need to be concerned about. Ronnie mentioned about drought. Research showing that organic, in building that soil, it's like a sponge. There's more pore space. It retains water better. But also the water that does wash off or go into the groundwater isn't polluted. So you're preventing pollutions. That seems like a savings to me. And research trends looking at organic versus conventional foods showing higher levels, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, bioflavonoids, and for sure, zero or very low levels of pesticide residues. So it's successful in providing good, nutritious food that's safe, that doesn't carry with it pesticide residues that are going to impact your or your children's health later in life. But it also prevents the buildup of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And a number of studies looking at poultry where organic poultry, going outdoors, living a healthy life, getting exercise, eating good, clean, organic food, much lower levels of salmonella or other pathogens. And then the ones that are there, because antibiotics are prohibited in organic, aren't resistant to antibiotics. The pathogens that are found in very low levels on organic farms aren't resistant, whereas much higher, like 6 times or more the level of pathogens, and then very high levels of antibiotic resistance among the bacteria found. So it's contributing to that whole issue as well. Other research, and there needs to be more of this, I think, looking at counties that are hot spots for organic production. I know Liz and Dave are going to get into the hot spot in the Lentil Underground story, but also you look at Organic Valley, the Viroqua, Wisconsin area, areas of the country that have a high percentage per capita of organic agriculture, have much higher levels of economic activity. So building rural economies as well, and just helping us reestablish our connection to the earth. And I think that's a huge problem. We've really lost that connection to the land, to the living beings. So what do? Well, I'm dividing this up. Protect our gains. First thing we have to do in these times, but also stop bad things from happening. Build on our successes, reclaim the message. And I heard a little bit of Melinda's talk about messaging, and we need to control and claim the message, even when it might appear to be some conservative rhetoric, and then some other ideas. So this is where we're going for the rest of my time. So some of our gains, the NOP regulation, the National Organic Program Rule, went into effect 2002. The law was passed 1990. Took a while, some false starts, bad ideas that were stopped, and we finally got a real organic standard. And I'm familiar with organic standards around the world, and I'm proud to say that we have the strongest on livestock, certainly, and comparable on everything else. We have a very reputable, strong, credible organic rule, and anyone who says otherwise, I challenge them to read it, because it is a good regulation. It's built on recycling nutrients and building the biodiversity of the earth. That's the underpinning. The challenge is to keep it to those principles, as Jay said earlier, and that's an ongoing challenge that we need to protect. But I'm very worried that the program staff, it's a very limited staff, around 40 people, to essentially regulate a $40 billion of organic sales in this country, that their funding, it will be a target in the next budget cycle. So letting your representatives, senators know that this is important to provide adequate funding. But also now in the United States, any organic operation that gets certified can choose to apply for reimbursement 75% of their certification costs. That's an idea that I took to the legislature in Minnesota in 1998. And we had a Republican House, a Democratic Senate, and Jesse Ventura was our governor. I pitched it as regulatory relief, because here you have a population of farmers who are doing everything the government could want to protect land and water resources. Biodiversity wasn't even talked about then. But here are these people doing all this to protect and produce good food, and then paying the privilege of being regulated to get certified. And so it passed, got a $35,000 appropriation. Big bucks. But it provided up to $200 per farm. So that was groundbreaking. But then in the 2002 Farm Bill, worked with Senator Wellstone, who we really miss. Worked with him to get it in the 2002 Farm Bill, and it passed. It wasn't adequately funded, but now it is. So anybody in the U.S. certified organic can get 75% of that cost back, up to $750 per farm per year. And that it doesn't help someone go through transition and take on the risk or all the learning curve, everything. It's once you're certified, you paid for it, now you get a rebate, essentially. But it's a very popular program with organic farmers, and I think we need to protect it. And once again, it's got a bullseye on it, so we want to protect that program. The same with organic research. We now are getting around $25 million a year federal funds dedicated for organic research. And a lot of that money is coming here to Minnesota. People don't know it, but University of Minnesota has over 1,000 acres, certified organic, 5 different locations, certified organic dairy herd out at Morris, one of only 3 in the country. I mean, we are a leader in organic research, but it's because people have been engaged. People have demanded this. It's not just been that we've had a brave administration necessarily, but we've got to have that fundamental research to keep organic growing. And now organic farmers can actually get paid when they have crop insurance, suffer losses, they can get paid at organic prices. That just happened in the last Farm Bill. So that's something we really need to keep there. It's only fair. And funding for all conservation programs, not just organic, I think are going to be on the chopping block. It's something that, you know, it's not an accident that the last member of the administration appointed was the Secretary of Agriculture. It's not a priority for the current government, but I think it is for certain members of Congress, and I think this is certainly something we can build across the aisle as support for conservation and organic, and I will say. But also programs like the Sustainable Ag Research and Education, ATRA, eOrganic, those are outreach programs that receive some federal funding. Those are really important. Among the bad things, both Jay and I served on the National Organic Standards Board, unfortunately at different times. It would have been fun to serve together. I don't know if you saw this. I think you did. There are people from the corporate world that own organic brands, and they're at the table every day. They've got lobbyists in D.C. They have passes into the USDA. They can just walk right through, and I'm standing there going through every search and everything, and I'm a board member. Anyway, there are constantly efforts to chip away and weaken the standards or weaken the enforcement. And let things through because they really want to sell as organic but continue doing what they've always been doing, you know. And a critical thing is for people who are understand and committed to true organics need to step forward, not just for elective office, but also some of these volunteer positions where you're lucky if they give you water. But anyway, I was appointed by the Clinton administration on their last day in office, so my entire 5-year term was to the Bush USDA. It was challenging. So people need to step forward, put themselves up. It's a huge commitment, but it's really necessary that people take it on. It's a 15-member board and actually has some real power over what materials can be used in organic farming and processing. Otherwise, it's advisory on other things like standards. Right now, we're importing about 70% of the organic soybeans and about 40 to 50% of the organic corn used in this country. If there's anything we can grow in America, it's organic corn and beans. We really could. But a lot of this is coming from Turkey. Big corn belt, isn't it? It's mysterious. They're a net importer of conventional corn from the U.S., but a huge exporter of organic corn back to the U.S. It's also coming from Ukraine, Romania, and a number of us. I currently serve as chair of the Minnesota Department of Ag's Organic Advisory Board, and we've asked our commissioner to communicate with federal officials, look into this. There was a story in the Star Tribune a month or so ago. If you look up about imported organic grain, you can read all about it. And the USDA is attempting to investigate. I will give them credit. They're not totally ignoring it, but even if it's authentic, what it points to is a major failure of U.S. farm policy if we're having to import 70% of the organic soybeans that we could be growing and should be growing and supporting farmers in this country. Anyway. And then another thing a lot of people, if they haven't been paying attention, don't realize is hydroponic products grown in no soil whatsoever, some kind of rooting medium that's then given liquid fertilizer that's approved for organic use, typically on a field, on a farm, but now that's all it is, are being certified as organic. About half the certifiers in the country are allowing this, about half of them aren't. And the USDA has allowed it. And the NOSB recommended against it in 2010. And we actually, when I was on the board, didn't support it way back then. To me, the law prohibits it, and that's shocking. Anyway, that's something else to be aware of and put pressure on the marketplace to not accept this, ask questions. There has been a proposal to create a checkoff to make organic a commodity program, and the comment period just ended, but I think that's still going to be a debate around that. So there was also an animal welfare rule that really tightens the regulations on what it means to be an organic animal, and that's followed years of the board's recommendations. It still could be undermined by Congress in the next 20 days or so. So contact members of Congress and tell them to let it go into effect as it was released at the end of the Obama administration. Farm-to-school programs, beginning farmer, microloans, all of these are some government services that are actually working for organic agriculture. Data collection, and I mentioned research and outreach. Some of the other successes outside of the government, relationship marketing. We sell our fruit to a brewery. I love that relationship. But knowing who's growing your food, buying and shopping farmers markets, buying clubs. Twin Cities has more food co-ops than any place in America. It's a wonderful culture to be a part of. We also have very good cottage food laws that allow small producers to process foods in their kitchens for direct sale. And things like internships, field days. Reclaim the message. I'd like to just state that organic is pro-life from the ground up. I mean, it's okay to be opposed to abortion. That's personal choice. But if you want to say you're pro-life, you can't just focus on one species at one point in time. There's a lot more to life than that. And I am pro-life, and I'm going to say that. We're also free market farmers. We farm in response to market demand. We don't farm for a government payment. We protect the environment through those market incentives that we receive. We're rewarded for our work. We care for creation. We love our mother. And conservation is conservative. It's not partisan. It's just common sense. And as it was already said, healthcare begins with healthy soil, and that's how you get healthy food and healthy people. And property rights go on both sides of the fence. I've got a property right to live my life free from pesticide and GMO contamination. That is a violation of my property right when polluted air, polluted water crosses and contaminates my life and my family. We also need to be concerned about homeland security. And I say preserving America's land and water while producing healthy food is about the most patriotic thing you can do. Really, what kind of country do we have if it's polluted and depleted and sick? And I just want to say that immigrants matter. And I mean, unless you're Native American, your family's an immigrant, or you were brought here as a slave, or your ancestors. And a lot of us started in agriculture. That's the toehold. And we have so many immigrants contributing to our food system that we need to acknowledge their importance in our lives. America first. Well, let's invest and protect America's organic and regenerative farmers and food systems. Like I said, even if that grain is authentic, why aren't we investing those dollars in our own health, in our own systems, in our own farmers? So a few other things we can do. Focusing on health at every level. Look at wellhead and watershed protection programs. How can we incentivize organic management of land just to protect water? Property tax credits for going organic, regenerative, grass-based. We can control these things at local level. Green education, and how about student loan forgiveness for going into agriculture or some health-related field? You can get forgiveness if you become a rural doctor, but how about a rural health provider that provides healthy food? Expanding organic purchases by the government. Food, a lot of food goes to feed the military and prisons. We could prioritize, and that could be organic, and we'd have healthier military, and we'd have more well-adjusted people coming out of prisons. Reform the Farm Bill subsidies, level the playing field. Right now, there are penalties for doing anything other than growing program crops. If you want to get cover crops in your rotation, if you want to diversify, you're penalized, and that's not right at all. And it's just counterproductive. And then I think we really have to have what every country in Europe has, a robust incentive program with both technical and financial support for conventional and beginning farmers to convert to organic. Big time. To me, that's my number one priority in this next Farm Bill. We've got to have it. We've been nibbling around the edges, but we've got to take this on and expand our organic literacy at every level, pushing for local and organic foods in the school, getting on these state technical committees or your local county soil and water boards. There's lots of ways to get involved. Just knowing your officials, developing relationships with them or their staff so that you're a go-to person on these kind of health-related issues. Get involved in university research. If you have ideas, bring them there. They're looking for ideas. They're looking for people to serve on committees. They're open doors in the universities for more than just Cargill and Monsanto. Providing support to like-minded groups, voting with your food dollar, and I just want to tell a little story. I haven't eaten at McDonald's since Richard Nixon was president. Has nothing to do with food quality or CAFOs or anything. Way back then, they were caught giving illegal back when campaign contributions used to be illegal, illegal campaign contributions to Richard Nixon. And I heard that, and it's like, if that's what they're going to do with their money, they're not getting mine. And I don't even act like they exist. I went to the bathroom in Moscow once in a McDonald's, but that's it. But, you can do this. You can just say these things are off limits. You can make these choices. It's not just trying to shop at the farmer's market and thinking you're doing it, but what happens, when you drive by a fast food place. But being engaged politically, get involved, and this is advice that Henry A. Wallace gave the USDA staff his last day talking with them. Plant a garden. Plant something. Develop a relationship with soil and with a plant. And it's amazing what that does for the spirit. So, my mom told me I can best change the things that I can control. So what are those? My diet, my food choices, how much I exercise, time I spend with friends and family. Those are the things I can really change. So I try and do those kind of things. But you also, and this is a problem these days, I see people are taking pictures, that's okay. But otherwise, put down your device occasionally. Tune in. It does tune you out of nature. You're looking at a little screen. And what can you do today? What can I do to transform how I relate to the earth? And put down that device again. Sorry. Remember, we're all children of the earth. We're natural beings who need clean air, clean water, and clean food to survive. And we're part of the earth's ecosystem and rely on its health for our very survival. We're all part of the web of life. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I know you need a little exercise, so.